The pressure. Hello, everyone. And we are back with the Mindful Constitution podcast. Hanging out today with Angela from the Align Experience at home barre and yoga studio classes, virtual classes,
Yes.
something like this. And then also, you have a podcast too.
I do. It's called Align After Hours.
Yeah. And retreat facilitator.
Yeah, lots of in-person things in terms of, outdoor classes once summer rolls around, retreats. We've got one upcoming in Guatemala next winter and more things on the horizon. So lots of ways to work with me.
Yeah, so cool. So cool. Well, before we dive in, how are you today? I feel like I always dive right into tell me how your journey unfolded. So I guess I should ask, how are you
Let's talk
today?
about deepest insecurities in your childhood trauma.
Usually, yeah.
I've had a funny day in terms of I woke up this morning and I was rocking and rolling, just feeling so good. And then I've got this potential business opportunity, and I got an email this afternoon that put a halt on that. And I just full disclosure, an hour ago, I was in tears, I
Um,
have to get on a podcast and pretend I'm okay. So it's actually wonderful that we're having this conversation to kind of
yeah,
divert my attention
take
into
your mind off of it.
yes, exactly. Yeah.
I
So
always,
that question, I'm okay. I'm fine.
you're like, I'm fine.
Well,
I'm just fine. It's funny actually. I always think back to, going through really emotional stuff and having to work in the hospitality industry, like waitressing. And I used to hate having to go into work whenever I was dealing with emotional things. But at the end of it, I was like, oh wow, that kind of helped.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
gets you
Sometimes
out
we
of
need to get away from ourselves for a minute.
yeah, gets you out of your own shit.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I hope that it all turns out okay. And you know what? I'm glad you got a good cry in.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's the thing. I was like, okay. I literally had almost a timer. I was like, you have until 2:30 to get all of this out, and then you can revisit it after the podcast.
Cry, ice your eyes, and then cry again after.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things, everything's fine. Nothing, you know, too dramatic happened. But I was telling my best friend, we talk on this app Marco Polo. Do you ever use that?
No, I've heard of it though.
Okay, so it's video messaging basically.
Mhm.
And I just said to her, I was like, listen, I know all this is happening for a reason, but please don't tell me that everything's going to work out. I just need you to hold space for me in this moment, of I feel sad about this.
Oh my gosh. Don't you just love when people can do that though and they don't feel the need to jump in and fix it? You're like, "Thank
Mhm.
you for just listening and shutting up, letting me
Exactly.
complain." I
Yeah.
just made a reel about that recently. Where it's when people start giving you advice, but you're really just trying to vent.
Hmm. And it's
And
well-meaning. We all do it, right?
yeah. Yeah, it's the human nature, human ego in us to wanna just kind of help people or resolve their discomfort, but sometimes you just gotta, get it all out
Hmm.
in someone else's presence.
Right. So it's pipe down and listen.
Yeah, yeah. "Be quiet, I'm not done yet." Um, I don't want solutions. I actually say that to John sometimes when, we're having our when I'm having my moment, I'm complaining about something, and he'll try to give me advice. I'm like, I actually don't want any advice right
Mhm.
now. I actually just wanted to complain and have you listen. Thank you."
I think it's good self-awareness to say, I'm not in a space to listen to your solutions or whatever.
Yeah. We know what the solutions are,
Yeah.
right? A lot of the times. But yes, okay. Well, let's see if we can get you distracted through some
Distract me.
Katie's interrogation podcast. So I know I heard a little of your backstory at our Women in Wellness circles with the Align experience. And if I recall correctly, you kind of started it during the pandemic. But
Exactly.
tell me and us more about just getting started with the Align experience. How did it grow? And how did you Kit, how did you start it?
Yeah, yeah, it was a pivot, and that's like the major theme of how I started my business because pre 2020 I was teaching at a few different studios, in-person yoga and bar classes. And I kept saying for probably like the year leading up to this, like I just want to work for myself. I just want to work for myself. Backstory is that I used to own a dance studio back in the day.
Hmm.
And I was literally like a child when I started it, but I always said like I don't want to open a fitness studio or whatever. I was just like very against it for whatever reason. And then when the pandemic hit, all fitness studios everywhere shut down. And so a lot of us started teaching online. And then I started teaching like a weekly bar class. And it just sort of morphed from there of people
Hmm.
saying, like, hey, we'd like more classes. And me, like, when I wasn't like either snacking or crying because the world was crazy, I was like, okay, let's do more classes. So the summer of 2020, I started a membership program and it's just kind of grown from there. So it was really like a happy accident.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's how all the best things happen, I think. Happy accidents and finding deeper meaning and purpose is just kind of chasing those nudges.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I never imagined that I would be in my basement talking to myself essentially and teaching classes that way.
Hmm.
But I actually grew to really love it. And to me, I think you can still have a similar experience with people. Like when I don't know if this makes it so that I have some sort of like dysfunction going on within myself, but I legitimately imagine the people that I'm teaching like in the space with me. So
Hmm.
when I teach, it's just like just like if you and I were together.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that sets me apart. It's not like a robotic thing. It's like I really want you to have that same energetic exchange that you would if we were together.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense to do so because I feel like that energy would really come across and create more of a sense of connection
Yeah,
between you and whoever's watching and listening.
totally. And I mean, there's tough things about it. Like I tend to give about 1 million options for every single pose or whatever because I have no idea what's happening for people at home.
Hmm.
Um, but it's stretched me as an instructor as well to get more into my own practice, get more into my body because every single thing that I'm teaching, I am physically doing full out.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a whole different ball game, but it's been really fun.
Yeah, definitely love it. And what you said too about the with entrepreneurship and just facing its own set of challenges, I think, but also not having to work for someone else. It's such a um, interesting balance because you have, I don't know, you get to pour yourself into something and you honestly probably end up working so much more than you do for when you work for someone else. But there's something nice about being able to create your own schedule and not have to answer to anyone, that
Yeah.
just completely your own vision that
Yeah,
you're bringing to life.
absolutely. And I'm sure you can relate to that. I think the difference a lot of time with entrepreneurship versus working for someone else is actually the emotional labor that goes behind it.
Mhm.
Because if things slow down in your business or you're not attracting the right members or clients or whatever in that moment, it can be really easy to slip back into this like nobody loves me kind of pattern. And so
Mhm.
if anything, it has been like therapy on steroids for me of like
Yeah.
really trying to like get okay with myself and the information that I put out there and my own self-confidence.
Oh my God, yeah, so huge. It's such, especially working in like fitness or coaching and those realms where it's deeply personal and a lot of times just grows out of our own experiences and that you're just translating into helping other people with. It's a really vulnerable position to put yourself in on social media and just kind of being the face of your business is you. It's
Mhm.
intimidating and scary. And it's been a long process for me too to get comfortable just not basing my own self image off external validation.
Hmm. Yeah, it is hard. And the fitness industry as a whole is generally something that I don't feel very connected to, which I'm
Mhm.
sure is like a funny thing as a I don't even call myself a fitness instructor because I just think like the word fitness has like some weird connotation to
Yeah.
it. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to be one of those people, even though I am.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of it. I mean, I catch myself being like, "Ooh, do people have some sort of idea of what I should look like?"
Mhm.
And then I'm like, "Okay, well, like I catch myself in those moments, luckily, pretty quickly." But it can be really hard to be like, "Oh, should I came back from Mexico recently, and it was like looking at pictures. It's like, oh, do people expect me to have like a six pack or something like that?"
Mhm.
And it's like, well, no, because I real also, in addition to being a movement instructor, I also really like to eat tacos, which I did a lot of in Mexico. So it's like, I mean, it is what it is, right? I am a real person in addition to
Yeah.
liking movement.
Yeah, not boxing yourself in is so big and allowing yourself to unfold to your fullest expression because I think it's so easy, even with words like sobriety with me. I'm like, I feel like that feels like you expect a certain type of person and same thing I could totally see with fitness or like wellness, even spirituality. There's like such a stigma sometimes that or stereotype that goes along with the idea of those words and it feels really labeling
Mm,
or feels a lot like we're just labeling ourselves and kind of in limiting ways sometimes that maybe like you said it's like yeah technically I am a fitness instructor but the way that we've like chosen to create this stereotype around fitness doesn't really resonate with exactly who I feel like I am.
hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's like, and I know people like this who teach movement classes and they're also like super, dedicated athletes, whether it's like running marathons and they're the type of people that go on vacation and then they're getting up every day and putting on their running shoes. And it's like, rock on with that. I'm the type of person who goes on vacation and likes to just lounge.
Hmm.
So as much as I try to move my body every single day, it's not all encompassing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of what I also like to do is like reset my nervous system and like give myself time to like chillax, after many, many years of like being on the go constantly. And my
Yeah.
body looked different then. It's true. And it's okay because I'm more in touch with myself now than I ever have been.
Exactly. Yeah, we all have different operating systems too, and try and listening to what feels best for you is so important as opposed to just looking at somebody else and be like, "Oh shit, should I be doing that because I'm also in fitness or whatever?" Forcing ourselves to do things that are allegedly healthier based on like a idea of who we think we should be. Like, is that even healthier?
Mm, mm, mm. That's a good point. It's right there.
You know what I'm saying?
I sure do. Well, right, because when I can look back, let's say 10 years ago, maybe I had a six pack then. I don't know. I don't think I was keeping track. But I was also burning the candle at both ends. I was like totally fried. So, like for example, when I met my husband, it's like I was in yoga teacher training. I was teaching probably 10 classes a week. I was go, go, go all the time. And shortly thereafter, I like crumbled in terms of like my emotional needs. And again, going back to the nervous system, so it's like, was I happy then? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think I stopped to really check in with myself. So
Mhm.
I'd rather be doing the dance I am right now.
Yeah. Doing the dance of balance and checking in with yourself and listening to your own inner wisdom instead of outsourcing your power.
Hmm.
All the good shit.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. This is bringing me, when you were asking questions, into my next question about actually curiosity. Because as we said in the beginning, you also host a podcast called Align After Hours, right? With you
Hmm.
and your friend Taylor. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Is that the friend you were Marco Poloing today?
No, she doesn't Marco Polo. No, different friend.
Ah,
Mm.
shucks. I
Mm.
was like, I feel like I know Taylor now.
I know.
Yeah, so you would do a podcast and I stumbled across one that was about curiosity and obviously that resonated with me because I'm a big question asker and
Mhm.
super curiosity. I was like, oh, I got to listen to this one. And you were talking a lot about the role that curiosity has played in both of the two of your lives. And I wanted to hear more about your thoughts on what role it's played in your own life in terms of entrepreneurship and health. Like you just said, just getting more curious about like, was I even happy then?
Mhm.
Or was I just like cracked out, stressed out, and skinny because of it?
Right. Yeah.
And then also like the role it has played in your personal and spiritual development.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that's a lot. Let me think. Curiosity, I feel like it's huge. And I actually think it's a dangerous thing not to pay attention or follow your curiosity. And maybe that's dramatic and be dangerous. It can be dangerous to follow your curiosity too.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if, I work with a business coach and her motto is if the dream is in you, it's for you. And I
Mhm.
really love that. And I think if something is nudging you in whatever way it is, let's say you're in a relationship where you're not satisfied or you're feeling called to switch gears at work, whatever it is, if something is making you curious, I feel like why not just investigate? Like, YOLO. I don't think we say that anymore, but as far as we know, you only
We
live.
do.
Yeah. Do we say that? Okay.
Millennials, I think we say that, right?
Okay, we'll go with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like it's kind of sad to me if people don't follow their curiosity. And so many major things in my life have stemmed from just like this little glimmer of wondering about something. And one of the things I think I shared in that episode, which was huge, a huge catalyst in my life, was after I had sold my dance studio, I was confused about what to do. And I just kept coming back to farming, which like was just not like anything else I'd ever done. I mean, I was a dance studio owner. All I did was like teach children, how to shuffle ball change and whatever. And so I just went to this farm that was nearby and they hired me for like 5 cents an hour. And it was the catalyst for so many wonderful things in my life. I like can't even begin to describe. I mean, just the freedom that I felt with like getting my hands in the dirt every single day, like it just was so special to me actually working there. But the friendships that I made, and in fact, one of those friends led to her being introduced to my cousin and they are happily married. And then one of those friendships that I made led to me meeting my husband.
Mhm.
And so when I like think about this beautiful little hub that me saying yes and following that dream, like where that went for me, it's so expansive I can't even begin to describe. So,
Mhm.
and I don't think every moment of curiosity is like that. Sometimes just as simple as like discovering something that you didn't know you liked or whatever. Um, but I think for me, just being open to those possibilities has brought really wonderful things in my life. Or deciding I wanted to become a yoga teacher and following that and the doors that opened for me and allowed me to be in a space to be really vulnerable, to be in a position to even be open to love and things like that. So it's been huge.
Yeah. Yeah, so much of I think our connection to deeper meaning and purpose is rooted in curiosity, like you said. I feel like, and I experienced this, I don't know about you, when you sold the dance studio, and also shuffle ball change will like haunt my dreams. Did dance when I was little too. Shuffle, shuffle, kick, kick.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, I have home videos of me like in the little routine.
I love it.
So funny. And the outfits, oh my
Oh, classic, yes.
god.
Hmm.
But yeah, I definitely experienced points where I wasn't feeling spiritually connected to deeper meaning or purpose in my life. And when I think of what led to developing that, it's not like banging your head against the wall, like, what is my purpose? It's just kind of following the nudges before you really have clarity. And it always seems like they do unfold in such a cool, beautiful way if you allow it to.
Yeah, and it's tough to be patient with those things. I mean, that speaks to the space that I'm at right now, kind of what I was alluding to earlier about my funny turn of emotional
Mhm.
events today. But it's like this patience of being like, okay, well, I followed my curiosity and like, what the heck is going to happen next? Kind of like having this timeline in your head for how
Right.
things should go. And it's like, if only the universe worked like that, right?
Yeah, it's almost like the more you think you know, the less it's gonna go like that, actually.
The best laid plans.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so it's just kind of this idea of it leading to beautiful opportunities that, especially when you're not expecting it, and just saying yes to spontaneity and exploration and experimentation. And how do you think that people in general could benefit from being more curious?
Oh my gosh, I think that could be huge. I think a lot of people operate from a place of fear. And, I'm sure you see that in your work all the time too, of like afraid to change patterns or whatever it is, right? Um,
Mhm.
and I see that all the time too with people who I can't tell you how often people say to me, like, I really want to start a movement practice. I just don't know where to start. And to some people, like, I'm sure to you, getting sober might seem relatively simple. Starting a movement practice to me seems like just like the one of the easiest ways you can care for yourself. But I also understand for some people that is a giant hurdle.
Mhm.
And moving their bodies or getting sober, whatever it is, represents so much more than just the act of doing that.
Mhm.
And so I think if you could approach it, like let's say you're at home and you're like, you know what, I don't feel great in my body. I know I need to start moving. I have no idea where to start. It's like play, like get curious, explore, roll out a mat or get on the carpet and just like roll around on your back. Like it doesn't have to be a certain way.
Mhm.
You can just be like, hey body, what are the messages you're trying to send me? Like just developing a deeper relationship with yourself. And that's one of the things I talk about in my classes all the time is like, we are just here to build a relationship. We can get rid of all those external things and all those expectations about what we should look like and all that other crap and just say like, how is my body feeling? What do I need? How can I love myself more? Right?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And so true what you said about curiosity being rooted in fear. And it's almost just, I think a lot of times we're so afraid of um, kind of like destabilizing our idea of what we think things are, that if we get too curious, it's going to open a can of worms, where I don't know. I think it's easier a lot of times to just stick in our lane and stay with the known and the familiar and the status quo, even if something so much more beautiful can be on the other side of whatever that exploration or change might be. And so I feel like we could all definitely benefit from that, especially because much of what we think is normal is rooted in just our programming and belief systems. So it's like, until you get curious and explore those, then how do you even know what you really think or what you really enjoy or what exercise is best for you? I noticed when people really are turned off from the idea of exercise, they're literally just thinking of a high intensity, like Orange Theory class or something. And there's just so many other ways to move your body. And that's just one example of like associating a habit with one version or like one iteration of it rather than like this can be executed in many ways.
Yes. Well, right. And I think too, there's almost too much information out there.
Mhm.
And so it's like, well, one person's going to tell you you need high intensity interval training, you need at least 3 times a week. I'll tell you right now that I am a hot mess if I do a hit class or something like it. Like I cannot recover. It's just going back, bring up my nervous system like 25 times today. Like going back to that, like it's not where I'm at this stage in my life. And it's fine.
Mhm.
So it's like, yeah, and so we think that's the prescription, something like that. And for some people that works great.
Mhm.
And if that feels good for you, wonderful. But if you're just feeling pressure to do that because someone said you had to, or you have to log X amount of steps, or you have to do planks, like whatever it is, like that's just not going to work for everybody. And to think that it would is just a little bit insane.
Mhm.
It's like, what are we?
Yeah. Yeah, but people love to be told what to do, even if it doesn't work for them. They're like, okay, I have instructions now.
Yeah, this feels terrible, but I'm going to keep doing it.
Exactly. Like, it's a little harder to use your curiosity and explore. I get that, but it's much more sustainable if you actually discover things you enjoy or information you enjoy or learn about yourself in the process as opposed to just tell me what to do, please. Even if
Hmm.
I hate it, I get that a lot with meal planning and stuff like that, where people just really they want the outcome and they want the transformation, but they want like an instruction manual. Whereas I feel like really getting there is learning how to trust yourself along the way.
Yeah, and food is just like exercise, right? Like, I can't have eggs. Someone else will feel great having
I eat
eggs.
so many eggs.
I'm jealous of you.
I've been going crazy with eggs lately.
I love it. They're so good for you. I
Uh,
just
I I
can't.
did. They came back as like a sensitive food on my. I did an Everlywell test like a super long time ago, and I was like, oh God, can never eat eggs again. And then I slowly started eating them, and I was like, I really just don't feel any different
Yeah,
taking them
you
out, leaving them
see?
in.
You
Yeah, and
got
then for
curious. You're
pregnant.
curious about eggs.
Yeah, I'm curious about eggs again, but I do have I'm kind of extreme, so I probably don't need like 6 eggs a day, but
Okay.
you live and you learn, I guess.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, so I wanted to follow up with the idea of curiosity because I know in that episode you also talked about just how breaking free of programming and kind of structures of what's expected of you is something that was touched upon. And so, will you say a little bit more about how that has shown up for you, just breaking free of expectations? I think this is something that so many people struggle with is like what other people will think of them or what other people expect them, or even what you said earlier about like, well, what do people think I'm supposed to be like? So, how to let go of programming and societal expectations.
That is a work in progress over here, and I'm sure it will be forever. I mean, when
Mhm.
I think back, I've been breaking free of norms forever, um, even though I wasn't aware of that. And the biggest example I can think of is how I choose to treat my autoimmune disorder. So, 12 years ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And, so much of why and how I do what I do is so deeply rooted in, helping myself recover from that, which, the doctors would say is not a thing, that it's for life. I don't believe that. And I imagine myself healing from this every day.
Mhm.
Um, but not following the guidelines of what the doctors said I should do and how I should treat this, air quotes if you're listening to this. um I just I think I took true ownership of myself in that moment when I said no, that doesn't feel like the right course for me. And ever since then, especially when it comes to what goes in, around, or on my body, I am like, I don't know what the word is, but I'm the enforcer. Like, you do not fuck with me when it comes to my body.
Yeah.
And that's a tricky one. It's been an ongoing struggle, if I'm being honest, with the part of me that deeply wants to be liked and loved and adored by everyone, and the
Mhm.
part of me that says I know what's best for me, and so back off. It's been really very trying, but also something that I know deep in my soul is something that I need to keep going with.
Yeah. Wow, that I didn't know that. I don't think that I remember you sharing that about multiple sclerosis, and it's I feel like standing up against doctor's orders. It's you hear the story often about especially people with like autoimmune conditions where, they're prescribed like medication for life or just kind of like, oh, well, this is just going to get worse until it's like debilitating. So, good luck.
Mhm.
But I don't think like you really realize what it feels like to go against a doctor's recommendations and how programmed we are to listen to the authority of doctors until you do it. and realize, like, even if you think you're someone who's like really well educated in the area or an advocate for yourself, when you're actually doing it and be like, no, I think that that's not right for me, and like every fiber of my being tells me like not to do that,
Hmm.
you still doubt yourself sometimes.
Oh
Did you
yeah.
experience that at all, where you knew intuitively, but just because it's this person we've given so much credence and like power to, or a position we've given so much power to, that it still felt difficult to go against the recommendations?
Yeah, for sure. It has always been difficult, and I've had to ask several doctors over the years to stop asking me. And it can be super condescending. Now I'm starting to get like I just start to feel like a heat building inside of me.
Just
Um,
let it out.
okay, I will. Here we go. Um, it can be so condescending when you're treated as if you haven't done any research or you don't know as much of them as them. And correct, I am not a neurologist. Thank you very much. But I am the one and only inhabitant of this body. And so no one knows my body like I do, just like I would never make assumptions about yours. Um, and in fact, I had this really devastating doctor's appointment a couple years ago. So when I moved up to New Hampshire 6 years ago, um, my neurologist is down in Massachusetts, so that doesn't make a ton of sense. I don't go to the doctor very often, to be honest with you, by choice,
Yeah.
because you know.
I
Uh,
know.
so I was like, okay, it would be nice to have someone local in my pocket just for like emergent situations or whatever if I ever need someone. And so I went to see this doctor and who came highly recommended. And he walked into the room and with like a very strong Russian accent, he said, "Oh, I didn't expect to see you walking. I expected to see you in a wheelchair." And I was like, "What? Like we've never met. I don't know where this information came from." But he looked at MRI scans from, I want to say it was like 5 or 6 years prior. And he expected at my age, what the scans were originally from, that my disease would have progressed to the point by the time he saw me that I would be disabled, like 100% disabled. And I don't know how I managed to keep it together, but this doctor basically just sat there and talked at me, asked zero questions, and was like, without medication, you will be immobile, and like proceeded to just kind of like lay into me. And I bawled my eyes out the whole ride home because I'm like, oh my God, he sees this all the time. Like, does he know something I don't? And I calmed myself down and then was like, fuck him. Like, that is so inappropriate on so many levels.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to see another doctor, and we have a better relationship. But I told her that she wouldn't be seeing me very frequently, and she was like, "Well, why?" She wants me to have scans done every 6 months. Like, it feels super aggressive. And meanwhile, the reason you haven't heard about me is like that I have it is because I choose not to talk about it very often,
Yeah.
and that
It's
is
not
so
something you want to label yourself with or think about or consume your time with. And
exactly right. That's
yeah,
exactly right. And so I don't want to give it more power.
right.
And so I told her, I said, I find it very depressing to come to this office. I find it depressing that you're like asking me to do these different tests to make sure I can still like walk appropriately. And like, I'm fucking crushing this. Like, do you see what I do for a living? Like, come take one of my classes. And then I just left feeling like, why doesn't she ask me what I'm doing to care for myself? Because I
Yeah.
could be an example for other people. And
Mm-hmm.
instead, they just want to say, these are the things that are going to happen to you if you don't listen to me. It's like, well, what about if you listen to me for a minute? Maybe you could learn.
I know.
It would be amazing.
Yeah, such a good point to make when people are crushing these things that doctors have just been trained to deal with to treat with medication symptomatically, and they're they've like been in remission or have actually like improved many of their symptoms. That should be where curiosity comes in. But I think a lot of our programming
Mhm.
around doctors is that they're infallible or that they have so much education that it can't be questioned. And doctors are just people too that just went to med school, and like, a lot of them have their trainings. And this is not to diminish, the trainings doctors go through and stuff, but a lot of people who are doing a ton of research can find a lot of information on their own as well. I've definitely dealt with that a lot through pregnancy where I'm like, I'm not just gonna be getting like every single thing they tell me to do. And when I research it, it's really eye opening that they even do it to every single person. And so I think, like you said, why not ask me like how I'm crushing this right now? If you genuinely thought that I would be coming in here in a wheelchair and I'm not, then shouldn't that spike your intrigue a little bit?
Totally. Yeah. Instead of telling me how wrong I am, I'm like, but I'm sorry, I'm doing quite well, better than you
Mhm.
would have anticipated. So, right, it does seem like you should be following up with some more interest in that. But, and this is no fault of doctors, like you said. I mean, they are incredible and they serve lots of purposes. When it comes to like everyday treatment for my disease, to me personally, and I don't knock anyone who takes medication, but I thought the side effects of taking those drugs were going to be worse than what I was presented with in terms of my illness. And so,
Yeah,
again, I want to fully trust in my body, and I'm not there yet. I haven't totally healed from this, but I want to trust the fact that that's possible and also learn how my body is telling me something, right? Like this didn't just come out of nowhere. And
right.
so what is it trying to tell me? And if I mask that with medication, I feel like I'm never going to get to the heart of it.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. And I feel the same way too. Like I think if you feel medication is the right route for you, that's wonderful. And I just think that we don't provide people adequately like their full range of options and informed consent with situations like this. And we've really extrapolated a doctor's scope far beyond what is really effective. I mean, they're trained to cure symptoms and use pharmaceutical or treat symptoms with pharmaceuticals.
Right. Right. And there's a lot of
Doctors'
money
textbooks
behind
are
that.
paid for by big pharma. It's
That's
like
exactly right.
there's a lot of like crossover between the healthcare system, big pharma, incentives for, you know, prescriptions of various kinds and stuff like that. So I think, yes, there's definitely routes that help people with medication and treatment in that way. But I also feel like people should be informed and not everyone would probably want to make, and I talked about this with on a different podcast, is that like a lot of people probably would opt for medication and wouldn't want to do all the lifestyle adjustments that chronic pain or autoimmune conditions would require. But I bet there's a lot of people that are really given pretty, a lot of people who are given the one option that would prefer to have other options. And so, that said, what do you think are some of the shortcomings of our current healthcare model? Pretty much that.
Oh, wait. I could not even tell you where to begin. I think as long as it operates as a for-profit system, we'll never get to the heart of like what's truly healing for us within those guidelines.
Right.
I think it's just as simple as that. And even though doctors are doing their best, like you just said, I mean, we're all kind of beholden to big pharma and all of that. And doctors are trained to prescribe, to perform surgery, whatever their role is in that way. And I think in terms of like life saving events and all that, I mean, Lord help me. I mean, I always want to be able to have access to those options, of course. Um, but I think, there's a lot to be learned. And I think if I had kept, like, in so many ways, my diagnosis was a true game changer in my life in terms of I had to really stop and say, how am I actually treating myself? Like, what is my lifestyle hurting or helping me? What is stress doing to my body? And so these types of things that I think we should all learn about ourselves, I would have never been given that if I had just kept going. So
Hmm.
I feel
It's
like
like,
it can be a gift in a lot of ways. I mean, do I want to be like, feel like I'm paralyzed on half my body sometimes? No, don't particularly like that. But it's like, okay, what am I doing? Am I doing too much? Do I need more of this? It's a dance, right?
yeah. Yeah, symptoms are just an opportunity to get curious and explore more about like what's causing them instead of just masking them and then going about our business. Is like, well, then what's going on in there? Side
Mhm.
effects plus like the same root cause that caused the condition.
Mm,
And so a lot of ways to look at it as like a silver lining and a canary in the coal mine that's just kind of trying to tell you that certain aspects of your life aren't conducive to you being the best version of yourself. And if we kind of stepped away from just quick fixes or feeling like we need something to immediately go away and kind of explored it instead, what could that do?
mhm. I remember when I was fairly newly diagnosed, someone gave me the Louise Hay book, You Can Heal Your Life. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've heard of it, but I've never read it.
Okay, so it's a wonderful book about, and this is what I would love for people to understand is like you can actually take control of your health. This is exactly how I feel about moving your body, fitness, whatever you want to call it. Um, that you do have control. And I think so many of us give our power away to doctors or whoever. Um, but anyway, this person who like we were just sort of getting to know each other. We weren't like officially friends, let's say. Now she's like one of my closest friends. But she gave me the You Can Heal Your Life book. And part of that book is like a list of conditions and their interpretation of why you get them. And then maybe like I want to say like a mantra to associate with it. And
Hmm.
so I looked up MS and it said hardness of the mind, which, if you know anything about MS, you actually get these lesions, scar tissue that builds up on the nerve endings, like in your brain or sometimes in your spinal column. And I remember reading that. It's so funny because I proved to the point, but I didn't realize that I was being ironic. And I was like, fuck that. This person doesn't know me. I'm not hard in the mind. And I was so mad. Now, of course, I have like a special edition copy of that book upstairs and like reference it all the time. Like, ooh, shoulder pain. What does Louise have to say about that?
Oh my god, that's so good. If that's what it is, I'm surprised I don't have MS too.
Right.
I can be pretty stubborn myself over here. Yeah, that's rich. Oh my god. Hardness of the mind, bitch.
Me,
You
she
don't
doesn't
know
know me. Yeah.
me? Oh my god, that's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to also touch upon speaking of mantras and mottos, I wanted to ask if you have one in particular that you utilize on a regular basis or kind of your life motto. If you had to think of one, what would it be?
Interesting. I do have like a little ritual that I do when I take my supplements,
Mhm.
which is kind of cute. But like, instead of just being like, oh, vitamin D, and just like whatever, I like imagine these supplements helping to heal myself. And so
Mhm.
those lesions I just mentioned in my brain, like I imagine them actually like disappearing and melting and all the neurons firing appropriately and all that. And always remind myself that I'm loved, I'm supported, and I'm grounded.
Mhm.
And I think too, like I've always just kind of kept this idea that I can do anything. And I hope that that light never gets dimmed for me because I think it's really important to just say like, to follow your curiosity and say like, screw it. I'm going to try this thing because what's the worst that happens, right? Like what is it? We're just like flying around on a rock, right? Like we're just like what
That's literally a great with full of craziness
yeah.
every which way.
Exactly. It's like, I mean, and we're worried about like how our shirt looks or something when we leave the house.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty wild when you think about it.
Yeah,
It's
it really is.
just
So
crazy
not
out there.
necessarily like a life's motto per se, but just I think just staying open to all things, all possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah, it ties in a lot to the theme of curiosity and just really being open and receptive. And also even checking yourself when you're realizing that maybe you're not as open and receptive or you're kind of building expectations around your curiosity too. Where it's like, no, no, that's the whole point. Don't do
Don't
that.
mind.
Yeah, no hard minds here. Many options. Rejection is redirection.
Ugh.
I know. Some of them are so bad, but you're just like, but I guess, you
But
know.
it's also true.
You know, though, when people say it to you when you're actually in a moment where you need to hear it, you're like, yeah, and you can just go fuck yourself.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, you read a book and go shove it.
Yeah, you're like, we'll shove that little mantra right up your asshole. So, oh, this was one. As we're laughing, I remember thinking when I first heard you talk that the first thing that stood out to me was your sense of humor and just happy, joyful presence. And so I wanted to have you share about how you think your sense of humor has supported you along, your now that I know too, this journey with MS and also entrepreneurship and yeah, spirituality and personal development as well.
Yeah, I thanks for thinking I'm funny.
You're welcome.
Well,
Spirituality, which I always associate with, yoga and barre and
mm,
these more slow, like mindful practices, and a sense of humor is like a must for me. I need like
mhm.
both because otherwise I'm like, oh, too much. It's too, like, it's a real green flag when people are funny and spiritual, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. It's a good combo. I feel like
Mhm.
it can be hard to find. I remember somebody said to me, I don't know, a year or two ago, like that they had taken my yoga class and it was the first time they ever laughed during yoga. And I was like, oh, first of all, thanks for the compliment. Secondly, oh my gosh, like I'm laughing at myself all the time in yoga. I don't know if that's just a
Yeah.
me thing.
Yeah. Don't
um,
they have laughing yoga now or something?
oh
Or-
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's
Yeah.
all the things in yoga, but uh,
Yeah. I know.
yeah, it's a little bit much. I I feel like, well, sarcasm is my love language, first of all.
Mhm.
But secondly, humor is a family trait. I don't think I could have escaped like not being funny. I think it would have been like ostracized from my family. Uh,
Mhm.
but I just think it's like, and call it a defense mechanism or whatever, but I just think it's the only way for me is to laugh through it. And especially like, let's bring it back to movement for a second. Bar classes are really hard.
Mhm.
And I feel like if you're only focused on how difficult it is, like you're just like, no, no thanks. I don't want that in my life. So I think having the distraction of like having someone entertain you while you do it is like everything to me.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just think if I didn't have a sense of humor, life would be really boring and probably sad.
Yeah.
So I'm not
Yeah, there's so many things that can easily weigh us down in life. It's so nice and refreshing to be able to not take it that seriously.
mm-hmm.
I'm like half emo, half comedian, so
Yeah,
kind of a wide spectrum.
I feel that deep in my bones.
Half very emo, sentimental girl,
Right.
and half I like love laughing and making people laugh.
Totally. Yeah.
Balancing those things, I'm like going back and forth between like some thoughtfully curated post on Instagram about feelings, and then the next one is just me like acting like an asshole.
Yeah,
Like,
I
oh
saw you shake your butt on Instagram today, so I
yeah,
know what
John
you're up
was like, "You're pregnant. Pregnant people can't twerk." I'm like, "Yes, they
to.
can." I'm
Hello.
like, "Pregnant people should be twerking,
Yes,
actually,
you can do anything.
buddy."
Right.
Yeah, you can do anything.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. I think too with entrepreneurship and just especially there, not taking yourself so seriously and just like having fun with it all feels really important. And working in the realm of personal development and fitness and
Mhm.
healing
Mhm.
and all of these things that can be just like really daunting and arduous. It's like this can be fun actually. We don't have to make it miserable to
Yeah,
become
it's
better versions of ourselves.
totally. And my goal like in teaching is always to just show up as I am. So if I, wake up I mean, I just taught a class a few weeks ago where I literally started and I started talking and I just started weeping. And I was like, okay, well, this is a first, but I'm just going to roll with it because I just want to show up honestly. And if that
Mhm.
means I'm feeling emo, I'm having a tough day, like that is just what's happening for me. I'm not going to try to fake it because I feel like people can smell that from a mile away. So
Yeah.
it's not all this like light and love and positive vibes only kind of thing.
Yeah, authenticity resonates really strongly with people, and I think it definitely shines through that your intention is to show up as you are. I think it makes you really comfortable to be around, and I've only met you a couple times, and I notice that a lot with people. It's like you'd rather energetically too, you can feel when someone's trying really hard to put up a front of what they want you to perceive as opposed to like what their energy is saying.
Hmm.
And so that's so uncomfortable when you can feel somebody's not being in alignment with their energy.
Hmm.
So I'm like, I'd rather you just cry if you need to.
Yeah, or just like be a giant bitch. Like if you're just not feeling very nice right now, it's okay. Just let it out.
Yeah, yeah. The incongruency when it's like actions aren't matching energy is something I think for me, I think I always was tuned into that, but especially without drinking. I think part of my drinking was almost to like tamp down on the feeling of other people's energies to
Hmm.
not have to feel it so much. And so when I stopped drinking, I was like, whoa,
It's a lot to take on other
yeah,
people's stuff. Sounds like you're
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and doing it, in a healthy way instead of masking. But okay, before we just ramble on all day, because I would do that,
Yeah.
I wanted to end with what advice you have for people who are you know, fearful about putting themselves out there, whether it be in a podcast, entrepreneurship, whether it's standing up for themselves and what they intuitively know is right when it comes to their own health and being their own advocate, like you just explained with your own story, and just following their intuition. What advice do you have in those realms?
Yeah, I would say the only way to truly know is to get quiet with yourself. And that might be something that irritates people that I said or makes them uncomfortable. We cannot keep running from ourselves. So it's like in the darkest whispers of your soul, not to be all poetic and shit, but
Animo.
yeah. Like when you're sitting with yourself, like what is it that is calling you? Like what is it that you truly feel compelled to do? Is there something that you haven't said? Is there a dream that's gone unfulfilled? Is there, somewhere where you need to take more control or ownership of your life or hold yourself accountable? Do you need to find someone to help you along the way? A coach like Katie or a teacher like me or, something like that, I think is just to really like sit with yourself. And we don't need to outsource everything, but just to say, what's missing for me. And I think when I started to get, that's another thing that the pandemic really forced on me is like
Mm,
quality time with myself.
yeah. It's so nice though when you get past being uncomfortable and then you're like, well, I don't need to be around people ever again. I
Yeah,
like myself now. This
I'm
is
good on
great.
Disney sweatpants. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was so comfortable.
Uh,
But yeah, I think just people spend a lot of time running from themselves, and as someone who's recently retired from that, I deeply understand. And so, yeah, if you can just get real clear with yourself about what's missing, even if it's just something little, like, I just really feel like I need to eat healthier or have that conversation I've been avoiding or whatever that looks like for you, I think it's important that we do those things because they eat
yeah.
away at you if you don't.
Right. And I think they continue to get louder in various packages until we acknowledge that lesson
Mhm.
we need to learn or obstacle we need to face or change we need to make. And so, and I'm sure that resonates with you too with dealing with health issues is, starting to deal with them. It's like it wouldn't have gotten any better had you just ignored it. And I think that bodily symptoms are one real example of that, but it shows up too in the emotional aspects of our lives we're suppressing, toxic relationships we're refusing to acknowledge, or dynamics that we're not looking at, or sources of dissatisfaction that we're kind of glazing over,
Yeah.
or too afraid to get like too close a look at. But that definitely resonates for me too. And I would say recently retired from running from myself as well. And it's so refreshing when you can really get comfortable alone with yourself, and it's just like such a powerful tool that no one can take away from you. And I think it is a key to building unshakable confidence as you grow your business.
Yeah, and whatever way you're putting yourself out there, whether it's the most, basic of things, I think if we don't know ourselves, we don't know how our bodies operate. I mean, there is a serious disconnect for people in terms of how their bodies move through space, and whether that's how we're, getting our nutrients, how we're moving our bodies, who we're relying on for health advice. Um, I think one of the biggest things we can do is to take our power back. And I don't think you can do that without getting to know yourself more.
Yeah. Beautiful. Couldn't have said it better myself. That would be my advice too. So good. I love that. And so if people are looking to find more of you, will you share a little bit more about just where your podcast lives, your website, the retreat you told me about?
Yeah. So you can find my podcast, Taylor and I's podcast, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Again, it's called Align After Hours. And then you can also find a link on my website and all things about my classes and memberships and upcoming events on thealignexperience.com. And the retreat information is on there as well. We're going to Guatemala in March 2024. Myself and a good friend of mine who happens to be a medium, we're teaming up for
Cool.
our second retreat. Yeah, super cool. So, and
I love
more,
that
like I said,
mediums.
yeah, right. So fun.
Yeah.
Some more events and things like that listed on my website. And you can follow me on Instagram at The Align Experience.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, that was such a good chat and so much to learn about other people. Who knew all of the things that you were going through and that brought you where you are? So much power in storytelling. So thank you for joining.
Thanks for having
And thanks everyone for listening. And we'll see you, hear you, you'll hear us next time. Bye.
me, Katie.